Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my Hellraiser franchise ranking video. Yeah, this one wasn't very hard to rank at all. I have a lot of love for Pinhead and the Cenobites, and I thought since that I've not really spoken a lot about this franchise on my channel, but I thought that this would be the time to let you guys kind of know how I feel about this franchise. So let's get into it. So, starting at dead last, we've got Hellraiser 9 Revelations. You know, when your film has the name Revelations, Reborn, Rebirth, or Resurrection, then it's time to go ahead and just, pick up the remote and casually just change the channel and put something else on. Hellraiser Revelation stands as my least favorite in the franchise. It's shot very weird, it's acted horribly, it just feels cheap. We have dollar store Pinhead, as we all call him. It's awful. This movie is absolutely atrocious. It has nothing to offer to this franchise. I saw it once when it first came out, like the first half, and I thought that it was so bad then, and I never even finished the film until years later. And I want to go ahead and tell you guys that actually right now I'm rewatching the franchise with my fiance, but after this rewatch, I will never touch this pile of garbage again, and I'm really dreading it. Alright, moving on to Hellraiser 5, Inferno. Honestly, if Pinhead didn't show up at the end, I would have never guessed that this was a Hellraiser film. And see, that's the thing. This film and every later film, every film after the fourth one, were not intended to be Hellraiser films. They were just turned into Hellraiser films last minute. They basically wrote a script for a crappy paranormal detective thriller and then threw Pinhead in it. But just as a standalone film, the acting sucks, the story sucks, it's boring, it feels like it just drags on for way too long, and there's barely any Pinhead in here for it to be called a Hellraiser film. Skip Hellraiser 5. Next we have Hellraiser 7, Deader. And I actually don't really have much to say about this one. This is more of just the same with 5. I can't even really sit and say anything different about what I liked and didn't like from what I said about Part 5. This movie feels exactly the same. It's the same movie. And I guess moving on to 6, it's the same movie as well, but the only reason this movie, I guess, is ahead of 5 and 7 is because there's one shot in this movie that's visually appealing, and the movie has Dean Winters in it. But he's not even that great in this movie. That's it. His character is unlikable, and I swear this man turns down sex with multiple different women throughout this movie. There's a lot of just this. It feels more like a porno than anything. It feels more like a porn parody of Hellraiser. And the return of Ashley Lawrence wasn't even exciting at all. This movie's bad, but it is slightly better than 5 and 7. Now we're on to Hellraiser 8, Hell World. This one is a little bit higher because unlike the last few on this list, Hellworld does have a decent premise. Is it executed well? Excuse me? Well? No. Not in the slightest. But it is creative. We do get Henry Cavill in this movie. I'm not really a fan of Henry Cavill, and I wasn't really a fan of his portrayal of Superman, but it is what it is. I do enjoy this movie a little bit more than 5, 6, and 7, and 8, or 9, excuse me. And, well, I guess this is the film that I enjoy out of the post-Hellraiser 4 era of Hellraiser films. Or the Doug Bradley ones, and Revelations, of course. But now we're actually going to move on to Hellraiser Judgment, which is the most recent one. This is the most recent up until the new remake that's coming out, which I will not be seeing, by the way. The only reason I have this one up so high is because we're introduced to the Butcher. And holy shit, the Butcher is terrifying. He looks terrifying, his mannerisms are terrifying, just absolutely terrifying. And the guy who plays Pinhead here is actually brilliant. Is he as good as Doug Bradley? No, but he's pretty close. He's pretty damn good. On the downside, though, this movie has too much of what made the later films awful. It becomes a dumb, convoluted detective paranormal thriller. But there is a pretty good plot twist at the end. But another flaw here is this movie is just kind of nasty. Like, this movie, I swear, is really nasty. If you're gonna watch this one, I can recommend this one, but don't eat lunch or dinner or whatever. Don't eat anything when you watch this movie. There's your warning. Alright, now we're going to move on to the good Hellraiser movies. So we're moving on to Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. This isn't a great film, and it was kind of unnecessary. But with that being said, this movie is really fun. There's some awful acting in this film, sure, but to me, this is the pure slasher movie of this film. So, maybe if you weren't a fan of the first two Hellraiser films, if you're more of a fan of like the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween franchises, or maybe even the Chucky franchise, this is more of a splatter film than the body horror, subdued horror film that the first film was. This film is filled with just really creative deaths. And if you're a gore hound, like I said, this is your Hellraiser film. If you want a more subdued and subtle film like the first, then this is probably not up your alley. I like both. Watch Hellraiser 3 and have fun with it. It's a fun splatter film. Now moving on to Hellraiser 2, Hellbound. I will say, this movie is really weird. Like, really, really weird. But the effects here and the overall aesthetic is really cool. And very, very appealing. And it kept me glued to the screen. This movie feels to me like a Nightmare on Elm Street 3. But this movie is a little more entertaining. Like, I think this movie's better than a Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Mainly because I'm just not a fan of Dream Warriors. But I am a fan of Hellraiser 2, Hellbound, I must say. I will say that the final battle is a bit disappointing with the evil doctor and the Cenobites. It did feel a little bit anticlimactic, but Ashley Lawrence coming back, along with Claire Higgins, who plays, what's her name, Julie, or Julia, something like that. Well, it was nice to see them as we get some familiar characters from the first one. It makes it feel like, you know, the continuity from the first film to this film. But this movie feels like I said, feels like a real successor to the first film. It gives us more of what we liked about the first film with the body horror stuff while trying some new stuff. And no, some of the new stuff they try in this movie, some of it doesn't work and can feel a little weird and out of place just for the hell of it. But you know what? I'd rather a movie take some risks and fail while still be entertaining than to just play it safe and be boring like, you know, the later Hellraiser films. Hellraiser 2 is a good movie. Now here's where we start getting into some controversy, guys. I got Hellraiser 4 Bloodlines as my favorite sequel. And I can't believe how good this movie was, going back and rewatching it. The first half of this movie is a prequel that I didn't even know that I wanted. It explains the Cenobites and the Lament configuration very, very well. Some really don't like this movie, I don't know why. This is a good movie, and this has the best ending to any horror franchise out there. So, well, maybe not I don't know. It rivals the Evil Dead franchise, but, you know, spoiler, I'm going to go ahead and spoil the ending of the film if you haven't seen it. They blow Pinhead up in space. That is awesome. Great ending, and this should have been it. This is just, Hellraiser 4 is a great sequel, and Hellraiser 4, to me, is the final film in headcanon to me. It's a great movie. Now moving on to the obvious, Clive Barker's masterpiece, besides Nightbreed, of course, Hellraiser. This movie is, to me, just a horror classic. This film has everything it needs to be a great horror film. Great practical effects, a brilliant story, a brilliant villain in Uncle Frank. This movie really utilizes Pinhead and the Cenobites just perfectly. Whereas Uncle Frank is kind of the main villain of this movie, the Cenobites are a dark, looming presence throughout this film. And Doug Bradley just creates an icon here. This film is why I feel that Pinhead is one of the greatest horror icons of all time. He's fucking terrifying. The Cenobites are just terrifying in general. And what makes them even scarier is that they don't understand the difference between pain and pleasure. And they have all these powers that can just, they can make you suffer whenever they feel like it if you open the Lament configuration. So please, guys, don't open the box. Well, guys, that concludes my Hellraiser franchise ranking. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'm out. Peace.